The Price by TalesFox88. Just on the outskirts of Everfree Forest there is a small pond. Although technically part of the forest, the pond is the complete opposite of the rest of the woods. While the great majority of the forest is dark and sinister, filled with all sorts of terrible creatures, the small glade is bright and peaceful. The water has only a small stream for an inlet and outlet. This, along with the trees surrounding the area blocking the wind, makes the water perfectly calm. Enough so that you could easily see your own reflection as though you were gazing into a mirror. In fact, that is the sole reason Scootaloo decided to give it a name, the Mirror Lake. Whether or not that was the official name she couldn't be certain. As long as she had come here, she had never seen another pony, just the occasional bunny or bird or fish. At first, she had thought about asking some pony whether they knew anything about it, but she had decided that it was better to keep it a secret. That way, it was hers and hers alone. Her own little paradise. It was a place that she didn't go very often. Normally only during special occasions. Sometimes when she was excited, but normally when she just wanted to be left alone. It was the perfect place to hide away. A place where she could just let loose whatever she was feeling without any fear of any pony seeing her. So it was this day, as she galloped along full speed from Ponyville. She took the southern path, following its similar twist and turn. Just at the right point, where the road curved to the west, she turned the opposite way, heading east instead. Had any pony been watching, it would have appeared as though she was running headlong into the midst of Everfree Forest. But, to her own trained eyes, she knew exactly which way to take, to quickly take her to her sanctuary. Navigating the hidden path through the trees, she continued at full speed until the beautiful scene came into view. Panting heavily, she finally slowed to a stop, and she was inside the clearing. She wasn't sure why she had decided to come here this evening. After all, Diamond Tiara was only making rude comments. If she had come here every time the pink filly insulted her, she'd be here all the time. She put up with the snob's hateful remarks all the time. Why should today be any different? Yet, there was something about today in particular that had hurt worse than normally. Today, Diamond Tiara wasn't just rude, but right down malicious. It wasn't enough to rub the fact in that the Pegasus still didn't have a cutie mark, but that she also was a Pegasus who couldn't fly. Scootaloo could still hear the filly going on and on about how pathetic it must be to literally have no talent in the whole wide world. He would have bucked her in the face so hard had Sweetiebelle not stopped her. Sweetie was good at that, keeping Scootaloo in line. Still, the orange filly wasn't going to sit and take the insults any longer, and thus she ran. Now, finally alone in the clearing, she allowed herself to vent up the build-up anger. Finding a sizable log, she pictured Diamond Tiara's smug face right in the center of it before pulling her hoofs back and striking the wood with all her might. Not content with just one kick, she continued, lashing out over and over again until the wood cracked and splintered under the force of her hoofs. Looking back up, she saw the deep gouges in the stump, but she didn't feel it was enough. With a quick hop, she leapt on top of the stump and held her head up high, extending her wings. She was going to show Diamond Tiara. She was going to show everyone. She could fly. She was going to prove it right here and right now. Significantly pumped up, she stretched her wings as far as they could and took a deep breath and leapt, only to find herself very quickly coming face to face with a massive puddle of mud. With a sigh of defeat, just let herself lay there, allowing the mud to envelop her. Diamond Tiara was right. She couldn't fly, and would never be able to do so. It was futile to even try. She could feel herself tearing up at the thought. Her one greatest dream was to be just like her idol, but how could she accomplish that if she couldn't even get off the ground? Slowly, the filly picked herself up, a sad slurp accompanying as she pulled away from the mud. Now thoroughly filthy, she trotted over until she was just standing with her hoofs just barely covered by the lake. Carefully, she wiped the filth off of her, rinsing out in a clear blue liquid. As she did so, she couldn't help but get a good look at her reflection. She could easily see the tears running down her, and now her mud-caked face. Stretching out her wings, she took a good look at them. They were tiny and depressing-looking things. The mud on them only made them look more so. The sight made her blood boil. The sad reflection slowly contorted into one of anger. Without thinking, the young filly lashed out against her own image, splashing the water until the spectre was no more than a series of indistinguishable waves. Even after it was gone, she continued to strike where it had been for several moments, until finally exhausted, she allowed herself to breathe. As Scootaloo stopped to catch her breath, she glared down in the water again. The waves continued to bounce and curl the water, breaking the normal pristine reflection. She could still just make out the image of herself, though it was more a large orange and purple blob. There was something else, though, a deep blue color surrounding her own form. At first, she brushed it off as merely being an illusion from the waves, yet, as the waves began to disperse, her colors remained. As her own image became more and more clear, so did the other begin to take shape. Hardly recognizable at first, it soon pulled together into the general shape of a pony.
Child, pray tell, what are you doing here at this hour?
Scootaloo didn't hear the entire question. No sooner had the first word been uttered than the young Pegasus had turned immediately to face the unexpected guest. There she saw another pony with a long mane, which sparkled and shimmered like a summer's night sky. Her wings were neatly folded in again against her dark navy coat. Her face, full of concern for the filly, was one that even without the other distinguishing features, Scootaloo would have recognized anywhere. Upon recognizing her company, the filly immediately dropped down in the bow, and her head just barely missing the water.
Princess Luna! I'm sorry. I didn't hear you come over.
The alicorn merely chuckled.
You have nothing to apologize for. I'm rather adept at keeping myself hidden if I so choose.
With a tap on the filly's shoulder, she motioned for the filly to rise.
Please, stand up. There is no need to be so formal in this place.
With the invitation, Scootaloo hesitantly rose up, till she was again standing straight.
Thank you, Princess.
Luna responded with a warm smile.
Please, just Luna is fine.
The filly returned the gesture.
All right. Thank you, Luna.
The two sat in silence for a few moments, neither of them really sure what to say to the other. Finally, Luna decided to break the silence.
So, tell me what are you doing here at this late hour, and covered in filth nonetheless?
Scootaloo suddenly became very conscious of the large amount of mud still clinging to her coat. Frantically, she began splashing water over herself in an attempt to make herself presentable to stand before royalty.
Sorry.
She began to stutter another apology.
I didn't think anyone else knew about this place, and...
Luna held up a hoof, signaling for the young filly to stop. With a faint glow of her horn, the various leaves and sticks stuck to Scootaloo's back were magically pulled off, as a gentle flow of water poured over the spot where they had only been a second ago.
I should think not,
Luna stated flatly as she worked.
This has always been a special place for me. I often come here whenever I need some time to myself.
Satisfied that Scootaloo was back to clean, Luna moved up to the filly's head and mane.
I actually placed a perception field around the area many years ago to prevent other ponies from finding it easily. Quite frankly, I'm rather surprised to find some pony else here as well.
Scootaloo was about to attempt another apology, but was quickly cut off again.
Now, child, you still have not answered my question. What are you doing out here by yourself, covered in mud? It's nothing.
Scootaloo responded with a sad sigh.
Really?
The princess said with a raised eyebrow.
It didn't seem like it was nothing when you were attacking your own reflection. I'd say it's quite the opposite, in fact.
Scootaloo didn't answer. She just sat there, quietly kicking her hoof against the dirt instead. However, just as Luna was about to apologize for intruding in her thoughts, the orange filly suddenly and quickly spoke up.
Why don't my wings work? I'm sorry.
Luna began.
I don't understand. My wings!
The Pegasus interrupted, stretching them out and giving them another flutter.
They don't work. No matter how much I practice, no matter how hard I try, They just don't work.
Pulling her wings back in, she bowed her head in sadness.
I'm just a worthless pegasus that can't fly.
Luna bowed down, attempting to look into the downcast eyes of the upset filly.
I'm sorry to hear that,
she said.
Is there something wrong with them? A broken bone, perhaps?
Scootaloo's eyes fell a little further.
No, nothing like that. Rainbow Dash says they're just too small right now, and I just have to wait for them to grow in.
The Moon Princess gave a comforting smile.
That's not so bad, is it? Your time will come eventually. You just have to be patient.
Scootaloo finished for her.
Yes, I know. That's what every pony says. But I'm the only Pegasus in my class that can't fly. Most of the Quilton fillies younger than me are already flying. Heck, even the Cakes babies are already able to fly, and he's just a foal.
As she continued on, her already wet eyes quickly turned into angry tears.
It's just not fair.
Luna sighed.
Not everything in life can be fair. We each had to deal with the cards that life has dealt us. Well, I'm sick of it!
Scootaloo shouted in retort.
I'm sick of just dealing with it. Do you have any idea how hard it is to be known as Pegasus who can't fly, even amongst my own friends? It's like it's the only thing that people think about when they see me, and I'm sick and tired of it. I'd give anything to fly right now, just to rub it in their faces.
Luna straightened up at the filly's comments.
Surely, child, you don't mean that you would give up anything just for this one thing?
Scootaloo glared up at the princess, completely forgetting how she was supposed to act in front of royalty.
Yes, I do,
she proclaimed with a stomp of her hoof.
I would give anything just to be able to fly.
The princess didn't respond, not directly at least. Her left eye twitched involuntarily, but other than that, she gazed down thoughtfully at the young filly without saying a word. As the silence wore on, the gravity of the situation finally began to take effect on the young Pegasus, and her expression softened slightly. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Luna spoke.
Very well,
she said softly. Bowing down, her horn once again was shrouded by ethereal light. As it glowed, Scootaloo felt a strange sensation course through her body. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't a pleasant one either. It was cold as ice, yet it didn't cause her to shiver. It started at her head and pulsed down throughout her entire body. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the glow from Luna's horn dispersed, and the strange feeling along with it. Scootaloo sat stunned for a brief moment before asking,
What was that?
Luna again stood up, straight and regal.
I have granted your wish,
she said plainly.
Look at your wings.
Scootaloo slowly swung her head back as she extended her wings. Her mouth dropped open from what she saw. There, where only a few moments ago were tiny little stubby wings, were a much larger, elegant set of wings. Nearly 3 times the size they were before, and the wings were covered in beautiful feathers that seemed to shine in the moonlight. She gave them a flap as she did so, and as she did so, she could no longer feel the ground beneath her hooves. She continued to flap her new wings, keeping herself a good foot off the ground. She was doing it. She was actually flying. With a shout of delight, the filly began to climb higher, circling around the area she had just been grounded to mere moments ago. It was almost as though instinctively she knew exactly what she was doing, and as though she had really known all along how to fly, but had just somehow forgotten it. With a flick of a twist of her wings, she allowed herself to relish in the found freedom, as she performed all sorts of dives and acrobatic stunts. So happy she was, she didn't even notice that Luna had also taken to the air and was flying right alongside her. The two flew around for a moment or two, before Luna landed on a nearby cloud and motioned for Scootaloo to join her. The Pegasus carefully landed next to her, eager to experience the plush feeling of a cloud beneath her hooves. Of course, it wasn't the first time that she had stood on a cloud. Remedies had taken her up on several of them several times before, but somehow the fact that she was now the one to fly up onto it made the soft substance even more comfortable on the roof. Luna smiled at the filly's delight.
Art thou pleased, young one? Is it as you imagined? Is it how I imagined? It's better than I could have ever dreamed!
Scootaloo exclaimed. As much as she wanted to throw her arms around the Moon Princess's neck, she wisely decided against it.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you! I'll never forget this!
Luna's smile faded away, soon being replaced by a rather stern look that kind of frightened the young filly.
I'm sure you won't.
She said.
Especially once I tell you your price.
Scootaloo took a step back.
My price?
Luna nodded.
Did you not say that you would give anything to be able to fly? Surely you do not think that you would just get this gift for nothing, did you?
Scootaloo would have taken another step back, but the cloud wasn't large enough to allow for it. Luna was right, of course. She had said that she was willing to give up anything.
Well, I guess not,
she said cautiously, afraid of what sort of cost the Moon Princess required. Luna, satisfied enough with the response, motioned to the space next to her. Luna hesitated for a moment before realizing that the princess was asking her to sit next to her. Slowly, she moved into the spot and sat down, making herself as comfortable as she possibly could. Once she was settled, she looked up at the Moon Princess, who had turned her gaze to look at the rising celestial body she ruled. Scootaloo waited for her response, but received none.
So, what do you want from me?
She finally asked. Luna didn't look at her directly as she responded, keeping her eyes on the moon instead.
What do I ask of thee? I only ask that you hear the words I have to offer thee.
The response puzzled the young filly, but she soon relaxed.
You mean like a story? I just have to listen to you and I'm free to go?
Luna chuckled.
Nay, that is not the price. But you just said... If only it were so simple.
The alicorn interrupted.
But unfortunately the price is much more than that. All that I ask of you is to hear my story.
Scootaloo huffed.
I don't understand. Then what is this price? All in good time. First, I ask that you listen to what I have to say, and when I finish you will know the price. Only then can you truly decide whether you are willing to give up such a cost. Does that sound adequate to you?
She only had to think about it for a second. This price, whatever it may be, couldn't possibly be bad enough if all Luna wanted to tell her story. Besides, the looks on Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon's face would be more than enough to make up for it. Eager to get it over with, she quickly nodded her head in agreement. With a slight bow to acknowledge the gesture, Luna cleared her throat and began.
Once, a very long time ago, there was a filly much like yourself, strong and intelligent, with many wonderful gifts that had been given to her. She had a wonderful sister whom she loved dearly, and who loved her in return. She had several ponies who cared for and respected her. In all these things she should have been happy. Yet, despite this, it wasn't enough. The children saw that her sister held something that she did not. At first it started innocently enough. She was just simply upset about it. But slowly over time, the thought became the only thing she could think of. Why should others enjoy what I cannot have? She would wonder to herself. Soon other sources of happiness no longer were enough for her. She had to have more, had to have it all. She felt that she needed, nay, she deserved it. That life had been unfair to her, just been unfair to her, and that she deserved better. Eventually, the anger, the jealousy, and the hatred became too great. It consumed every fiber of her being. Within time, she let it completely envelop her, transforming her into a terrible monster.
Luna looked down intently into the curious eyes of the young filly.
She became Nightmare Moon.
Scootaloo gave a tiny gasp.
But wait, that would mean that this story is about me?
Luna answered the question before the filly could ask it, Bowing her head with a sigh, she continued.
Yes, this is my own story, I'm afraid. I let my own jealousy get in the way of my happiness. I let it fill my very soul until there wasn't enough room for anything else. It twisted and controlled me until I let it change my very fate, turning me into something else, something dark and terrible. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I was already far too gone. I had already given up everything. All that was left was a shell of my former self, former life, filled with darkness and hatred.
Her voice trailing off with the last sentence, the regal Erlecorn became silent. Scootaloo looked up at her expectantly, but received nothing in return. Luna just sat there, staring intently on the moon, now clearly visible above the horizon, reliving the terrible memories in her mind all over again. Scootaloo was unsure of what to say.
I'm sorry.
She mustered.
It must have been hard.
Luna sighed.
Hard? Yes, child, it was very hard. 1,000 years of sadness, loneliness, and fear. It was very hard indeed.
Then she turned to look at the small filly.
I just hope that you don't have to share the same fate.
Scootaloo tensed.
What do you mean? I'm not planning to overthrow Equestria. No offense. You're not going to banish me to the moon just for one to fly, are you?
The Alicorn shook her head.
No, child. I'm not going to banish you for that. Then what? I don't understand. What does that story have to do with me?
Luna raised her eyebrow.
Surely, you don't mean to tell me that you do not see the connection.
Scootaloo simply shook her head. Luna looked at her for a moment before asking,
Tell me, child, why do you want to fly so badly? What do you mean? Why do you want to fly?
the princess repeated faintly.
Why is it so important to you?
The filly, unsure as to what Luna was getting at, answered.
Well, all the other Pegasi can fly. I just want to fly like them. Oh, so what you're saying is that you're jealous of them, is it not?
Instantly, Scootaloo caught on as to what Luna was insinuating.
No,
She defended.
I mean, it's not like that. I'm a Pegasus, and I'm supposed to be able to fly. So, you think you're entitled to it. You deserve the ability to fly. Yes, I mean...
The connections began to become more and more clear in her mind.
It's just, I'm sick and tired of waiting for what I already should have.
Luna's expression still didn't change, despite the filly getting more and more upset.
So you admit that it is your own greed and impatience. It's not like that. It's just that it's not fair that I had to wait for so long. And what about all other types of ponies? Someday in the future, you would have eventually gained your wings, but what about them? Is it fair that they should not be granted the gift of flight as well?
At this point, Scootaloo lost all signs of decorum she had been holding on to.
It's different, all right?
She shouted out.
You just don't understand. All Pegasi should be able to fly, and I just want what's rightfully mine. Besides, it's not like I hate my sister and I'm trying to usurp her throne.
Only after the last words passed her lips did Scootaloo realize what she had just said. Horrified, she gazed up at the once calm princess. Now, however, Luna was anything but calm. Her eyes glowed with an unearthly light, her face twisted into an terrible scowl. The very air around her seemed to grow darker, and all warmth seemed to drain out from the area surrounding them. When she spoke, her voice was far from the calm and collected sound it had been before.
Let us not dare to think ourselves greater than us. Let us not dare to claim that we who have lost more and suffer greater for our crimes than you can begin to comprehend. Do not understand the way that thou speakest.
Scootaloo curled up into her ball and whimpered. This was not the first time she had been exposed to the royal Canterlot voice. Yet, on Nightmare Night, she had not had to bear the full blunt of the attack. As Luna gazed down on the frightened child, her demeanor softened, her eyes returned to the normal regular blue color, and the air around the pair returned to normal as well.
Forgive me.
she said, bowing her head in apology.
I should not have raised my voice like that.
Quickly, she raised her head back up to the filly again.
But you must understand what I'm trying to say. You are not much different than I was all those years ago.
Scootaloo seemed to straighten up a bit from seeing the princess apologize.
But what I want is small compared to yours. Am I really going to get into so much trouble just because I want to fly?
Luna smiled, glad to see the filly finally opening up.
So you admit that it is a small thing that you desire, even if it is important to you.
The pegasus shrugged.
Well, yeah, I guess it is. And would you really be willing to give up anything for something so small by comparison?
Before Scootaloo could answer, Luna raised her hoof and silenced her.
Don't answer that,
She said.
Not now, at least. First, you have to realize that even my desires start out small. I just wanted ponies to recognize my beautiful night the same way they saw my sister's day.
Her ears fell flat as she recalled the memory.
Had I been more open to what was around me, I might have noticed that I had no reason to worry. Instead, I let this one small thing grow until I felt that I deserved so much more than just admiration. My own selfishness drove me to desire more. But I don't want all that.
Scootaloo retorted, though not as defensively as before.
I just want to be able to fly. Is there really that much harm in that?
Luna looked deep into Scootaloo's eyes.
And what happens when that is no longer enough? What happens when something else comes along, something even bigger? Will you not think to yourself then as you do now? Will you not think that you deserve such a thing and again be willing to do anything for it? That is the way that greed works. The more that you give into it, the more will inevitably lead to your downfall. You mean like being banished?
Luna shook her head.
Perhaps not, but banishment is far from the worst thing that could happen. You see, when I became Nightmare Moon, I surrendered myself to the darkness. I lost everything that night. Every bit of peace, joy, and happiness was shattered by my own selfish desires.
Pausing for a brief moment, she leaned down until she was looking directly into the filly's eyes.
I didn't just lose my place in the kingdom that night. I lost myself as well. That is the price, child. It is the price that ultimately all who give in to their own greed must pay. You may not have to pay it today, or tomorrow, or even this year, but eventually it will catch up to you and claim its debt.
Standing straight once again, the princess concluded.
You said that you would give up anything for this one small thing. You will need to be ready to uphold that because you must be ready to lose everything to your greed. Now, child, you stand at the crossroads and I offer you a choice. You may keep the gift that I have given you and continue to follow this path to wherever it leads. Or you can choose to take the harder path and reap the rewards that lie at the end. What say you?
As Luna finished, Scootaloo gazed longingly back at the wings she had been given. This had always been her greatest wish. The thought of giving them up after finally having them just seemed unbearable. Still, the princess's words rang in her head. Would you really fall down that path? Luna didn't say anything while Scootaloo thought. Instead, the entire area remained completely silent, until, finally making up her mind, Scootaloo spoke.
It's getting late. I think I should be heading home.
She stood and stretched her wings out, giving them a quick flutter. But before she could take off, she stopped, folding them back in, and turned to Luna with a smile.
Would you mind giving me a ride back?
Luna simply returned the smile and nodded.
Yes.
She responded.
That is a wish I'd be happy to grant.
The end.